What's going on, guys? Red Channels here. I am rapidly approaching 25, so I thought I'd make a video reflecting on some things. If it's not really your cup of tea, don't worry. Regularly scheduled programming will resume shortly. I don't expect to do this every day or every week or something like that, but I just thought I would have a bit of an unstructured video where I can reflect on the state of the world, politics, my own experiences, why I even became a Trump supporter. Because unlike a lot of you, I was actually, well, like some of you, I'm sure, but I was liberal at one point. And not only that, I grew up in a very liberal area too. I didn't even know any conservative or right leaning people for, uh, I'd say, probably the first 18 years of my life at least. As usual, you don't have to agree with everything I say, most of what I say, or really any of it at all. I am just a guy giving his opinion online. I am a guy with a YouTube channel, not a YouTuber. But I just thought I would think out loud for a couple minutes here. So, back when I was younger, I think it was around like 13 or so, like late middle school into early high school, I really began questioning a lot of the fundamental assumptions and really the narrative, the liberal left leaning narrative that I was being told. Like when I got to high school, at a certain point, I just totally stopped believing in free will, and I stopped believing in human equality too. I was an atheist at that point, and I, was into hard determinism, that philosophical position, and I had a materialist conception of reality. Um, and I mean, I reasoned that, it doesn't make sense that free will exists because people are just basically robots made out of flesh. And therefore, your actions are the result of your reactions to external stimuli and an irreducibly complex set of inborn material identifiable characteristics. So, people, and I still kind of believe this today, people, although I'm not an atheist anymore, people behave in very predictable ways. We can't necessarily know all the factors that cause someone to do something, but it's pretty routine. And, people have like inborn personalities, inborn physiological responses to things that determine their behavior. And also, I reasoned that human morality is also therefore a social construct, because it never made any sense to me that if there's not some sort of, author of creation, so to speak, who intends actions to be good or bad, then our perception of what is good or bad is just conditioned by culture. And also, uh, perhaps also, whatever is evolutionarily beneficial. So we have certain norms, certain customs, because that they are more conducive to creating productive, efficient societies. And then societies that are more productive and efficient than other societies are able to outcompete them. And then, it's sort of survival of the fittest in that way. And I also felt that, your average person was essentially irrational, or at least not able to think through important issues in an unbiased way. And once you adopt that and take that idea to its logical conclusion, so to speak, democracy stops making sense. And I also sort of looked around when I was 16 at the state of the country, and I wasn't really on a side. Like, I didn't really have a strong preference for either candidate at that point. Um, I'd never met a right wing person really. So it was still, it was still scary. Oh no, I'm going to be killed by these hillbillies. Like, no, no. But I was like, well, there's clearly some sort of breakdown in our democracy going on. And people are too emotionally invested, or alternatively have certain conflicting financial interests, which make this basically impossible. Like, I was like, there is now this insuperable gulf in our country. People are on two different narratives, two different views, and uh, there's no putting Humpty back together again. so to speak. There's no like getting everyone back on the same page. So I was kind of like, well, I'm not really picking sides, but just looking at the landscape and how people approach issues in such different ways and how everyone seems to be talking past each other and how like diametrically opposed people are on issues. Like the Republic has clearly failed slash is in the process of failing. And also, while I viewed conservatives as sort of unknown and a little bit scary, a lot of the claims that liberals said were going to happen if Trump won or if Republicans took power in some way just seemed obviously false to me. Like a lot of liberals would really have you believe like they're going to undo the entire civil rights movement and then eventually there's going to be slavery again. Like, it's just ridiculous stuff. I'm like, that's not happening. Like, it's not going to be great for the country. But a lot of what the left was saying was clearly alarmist to me and in a clearly delusional and dangerous way too. Like that's kind of one of the things that set me off. I'm like, well, people have kind of always thought this way. If a bunch of evangelicals suddenly get voted into office, like what's the worst that's really going to happen? Like people have thought this way for over millennia. Like Christianity really isn't that scary. Oh man, they're gonna take all your rights away. Like no, it's just gonna be return to the status quo, like the return to the historical default. I don't really agree with that, or at least I didn't at that point. But it's also like, well, it can't be that much of a catastrophe because literally people in living memory we know there was a period of time when everyone thought this way. We literally remember what it was like, and it wasn't even that bad. Then there are other things like certain little social issues that I became uncomfortable with that I just didn't agree with the rest of the left on. Um, like one of those being abortion. And it just always made me super uncomfortable because I would have to basically say, like, I was a fetus at one point. So if I support abortion, that means my mother had a right to like kill me at one point just because I was inside of her. That makes that acceptable. She could just get rid of me. Yeah, I support my mom's right to just eliminate my life and my future when I'm growing inside of her. I was like, no, And I mean, the answer from my dad was just that he was like, oh, well, this is up to women to decide and they can sort of sort that out amongst themselves. But I was like, I just had a problem with the idea that, I would be, it seems self defeating, if you can get what I'm saying. It seemed like I would be, even though I'm already alive, even though I'm born and there aren't retroactive abortions, at least not yet. um, it still seemed like it was going against my own self interests. Like was offensive to my own uh, instinct to survive. Another argument that influenced me at this time, questioning sort of overarching liberal narratives, was actually a critique of liberal democracy that my mother made, despite being the most inoffensive liberal woman in the world. I remember she told me one reason she thought that total political polarization may be inevitable was because to attract more voters and drive up turnout, the messaging of both political parties would intensify and become increasingly extreme, regardless of where objective truth may lie. So, really, whatever gets the most people out to the polls at any cost to stay competitive with the other party is what they're going to say. And that made a lot of sense to me. I mean, I wouldn't say that's my main critique now. Obviously, I think the left and liberals are the party of insanity, are the ones who've gone off the reservation. But you can still sort of see the logic behind this. Another thing that really rubbed me the wrong way about the left during this time, especially as a young man, because this is like 2016, this is like the peak, the zenith of the third or fourth wave, whatever it is, feminist movement. And I really felt that men were being demonized. At the time, I mean, I would say now, yeah, that's definitely what was going on. At the time, I felt conflicted because, I supposed to support women. What's wrong with that? Blah blah blah. But then on the other hand, I'm like, I'm a man and I have my own issues, and I feel like there's this movement just feels like a relentless attack. Like I'm being identified as the problem. And now I would say that yeah, feminism is evil and the demonization of all male authority. And I really despised all these attacks on traditional masculinity and calling it toxic. I mean, to me, a man is strong, a man is courageous, a man is fearless. Even if I personally failed to meet this standard, I would not see it attacked. I always had the very strong conviction that even if I wasn't acting like a hyper masculine traditional man at all times, like that would be either it's sort of irrelevant, it's morally irrelevant, or it would be a moral failing on my part. It's not because there was something wrong with the ideal in and of itself, which is what I felt feminists and by extension the left generally was constantly suggesting, and that really rubbed me the wrong way. I think also what kind of helped me in this regard, interestingly enough, is because so many of my relatives like went to prison. Um, so like, prison is a very harsh environment. You have to be strong. You have to be tough. You can't be weak. There's a whole philosophy. There's a whole political outlook that exists from prison as an institution and has influenced countless millions of Americans. Um, there's that book, Behold a Pale Horse, this conspiracy book, which every prisoner has read pretty much. But another thing, too, is a motto of these family members I had who had gone to prison. A motto they had was win, lose, or draw, you fight. Win, lose, or draw, you fight. And this is fundamentally incompatible with everything the left teaches. It's just a value they can't have men having. Because to be a man, to hold that value, makes you a traditional masculine man. In my search for truth, I observed that there was no equality in nature, just as there was no equality in prison, and no equality in my own circumstances at the time. Some people are more respected, have more renown than others, and that's just the long and short of things. People are fundamentally unequal. You can't escape that, and you can't make them equal. Another thing that I'd observed because I was on this quest for ultimate truth, really at age 16, I had this philosophy class that sort of set the seeds, but then I went on this path of wanting ultimate knowledge. And another thing that made me break with the liberal narrative is the fact that apparently IQ is like 80% heritable. So 80%, there's like an 80% chance or something like that to that effect that your IQ is what your parents had. You get that mostly from their genes. Um, and based on different groups, different demographics of people, you can extrapolate from that what you will. But as prickly as the implications of this realization may be, again, I felt, and I really still am in a way, I felt that I was on a quest for absolute knowledge, right? If I don't like the conclusion that I arrive at, then my feelings shouldn't be spared. I'm out for the truth. I'm out for knowing things as they are, as the world really is, at any cost. I don't care if it hurts. I just want to know. I want to know why. I want to know the answers. In mid to later high school and especially in college, I decided that I wanted absolute knowledge of reality. I wanted to peek behind the curtain. You know, like the Wizard of Oz, say, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. No, I'm paying very much attention to the man behind the curtain. I want to know why. I want to know what's going on. I mean, this is kind of ironic given the fact that I'd already sort of denied the, shall you say, Enlightenment belief that unaided human reason can properly and fully understand reality. I was like, well, why should we put all of our faith, all of our trust in scientific progress? how do we it's always shifting too. Someone's always discovering something new. Theories are changing. You know, you go back 100, 200 years, and phrenology, that is the study of people's skulls, was considered legitimate science, and now it's not. It's like this shifting sands. So why am I supposed to put my trust in that? Why am I supposed to put my trust in scientific consensus when it could always conceivably change to something else? By the time I got to college, I was fixated on finding the optimal or most moral, the ideal mode of governance. Was that liberal democracy? Wasn't it liberal democracy? What else could it be if not that? And I was interested in exploring those concepts, and I took some political philosophy classes. I learned about Plato. You know, I'd already kind of done the basics of Plato in high school, but I learned about Plato and other things, you know, the Peloponnesian War. And I had a friend in college who persuaded me that the answer had really been Christianity the whole time. You know, this was the truth. This was the way. This was the light. And I had been avoiding it in various ways in my atheism or agnosticism, various personal ways where I wasn't doing what I should be doing, and this is really what I knew to be true. And, you know, the purpose of my life was to obey the one true God. You know, I had a friend in college who convinced me of that, and this is why I am a Christian now, or I should say, I became a Christian again, because my parents were like vaguely Christian in their own ways. I became an atheist, and then I became a Christian again, and I sincerely believe that the Most High God delivered His grace to me and regenerated me through the experiences I had with one of my friends. Um, and you know, because you know I'm the way I am. I have this bug in me. I want to know everything, etc., etc. I became fixated on I was already into political philosophy. So I became fixated on, well, if Christianity is the true religion, then what is the optimal mode of governance put forward in the Bible? How does God want believers to organize themselves in a political manner? What is it monarchy? Is it democracy? Is it something else? What is the ideal way that God wants his people to organize themselves on earth? And because I believed I felt God's grace acting on my life, delivered through the advice and the words of my friend, I began to seek this question out. I began to really attempt to answer the question of how does God want his church to exist on earth? And in order to discern the correct answer to this question, I believed I must first determine what the most accurate or correct understanding of the Christian religion is. So I needed to do deep research into theology. You know, and I've since felt that apologetics is kind of a waste of time. Most people have already made up their minds. Faith is a gift. I'm not going to persuade most people of it. Some of my longer time subscribers will remember this, but in earlier videos, I'd make like frequent references to Bible quotes and things like that. And I'm not precluding myself from doing that in the future, but you know, I've just since given up on the idea that I can just, you know, prove to everyone what quote unquote true Christianity is. Ultimately, it's something that is deeply personal and private, and I can't claim to have all the answers. I've done reading, I've done research, I've done etc. That's led me to my own conclusion, but ultimately, I'm just some guy, and it's just my opinion. You know, my perhaps semi-informed opinion, which is, you know, worked hard to try and get things right, to try and be accurate, but it's not like I have my own stuff figured out really personally. Like would you would you take advice from on like running track or running a marathon from someone who's like never walked in their life, who's in a wheelchair? Like no, you wouldn't. I don't have things perfectly figured out in my own life. I'm having a quarter life crisis right now, but and from my studies, what I felt was the most correct, consistent message from scripture was something approximating a combination of Presbyterianism and traditional Adventism. So, predestination and soul sleep, that is, you're dead in the ground until a literal physical resurrection, as well as an occasion Christology. But apologetics and debating people on scripture and things like that, I just felt was such an unmitigated failure and disappointment. I'm not even really interested in litigating these things. In my opinion, the state of the Christian religion in the West is just awful. Nothing's going the way it should be. Nobody understands anything. Uh, it's been corrupted by uh, Greek Platonic philosophy, and people are just going to cling to whatever their pastor says. And this is why God is visiting the West with another judgment. People do not actually want to find the truth, but it's almost not even worth arguing over those sorts of theological details. It's more important to find people who are interested in being productive and growing and doing the right thing in their own personal lives and gathering to them than it is arguing over these abstract nuances. And to be clear, it's not as though I had no knowledge of Christianity before my friend persuaded me that it was the truth. When I was younger, I generally believed in God. My parents did take me to Sunday school, or at least my mother did, went to a theologically liberal church. Um, and, uh, I came to a point where I began to feel that as liberals call it, a fundamentalist or literalist interpretation of the Bible was indefensible. And I believed that for a while, and that's when I sort of became like an atheist or an agnostic and uh, began to view things, began to view the world as very like robotic and materialist and things like that. But what really never jived with me, because you see all these atheists, they have the, online uh, genetically modified skeptic, whatever other Alex O'Connor, whatever other atheist figurehead, they have this sort of victim complex, um, and I never could really fully swallow that. I never could really agree with that. I found myself, even though I was like, well, I don't know if this literally happened or not. I don't know if it's true in that sense. I mean, now I would say I am a literalist, to be clear, but um, I was thinking, well, I don't know. I'm kind of agnostic, but like, I just couldn't stop thinking about the Bible. I couldn't. I realized that it was the most beautiful story that I'd ever read or ever heard of, and I just could not bring myself to view the God of Scripture as evil, or alternatively that his son was just making up claims that Jesus Christ was not a good person, not the best person. I recall one time listening to a video of an atheist criticizing Jesus and his teachings themselves, not attacking the religion of Christianity as a whole, but specifically attacking Jesus. And I remember I was just viscerally disgusted by it. I didn't even believe there was a higher power when I listened to this video, but I remember what he said was just repugnant to me. But aside from all of that, aside from the specifically religious stuff, The other work that has been very influential in my political thinking has been the book Leviathan and Its Enemies by Samuel Francis. And this informs a lot of my commentary and my analysis of certain issues. If I were to give myself a conventional American political label, I'd probably self describe as a paleocon. A lot of people you'll see on the right are sort of burnt out with politics. They don't want to do anything. They've sort of given up. I personally feel this a person should interact with politics for the sake of mitigating damage or harm reduction, as liberals call it. It doesn't mean, you're not going to get everything you want, but it's still a choice between you can get some of what you want or none of what you want. I'd rather have some of what I want. Even if it's not all of what I want, I'd rather have some of what I want. And that is why I continue to interact with electoral politics. And in my view, at the moment, American neoliberal globalist forces are attempting to expropriate wealth from the American working class in order to, in the long term, build a sort of global, globalist government structure. They want to integrate the U.S. with China economically. We've already kind of done that. Trump is, a fly in their ointment, so to speak, an impediment to their progress, which is why they hate him. There's that old Hillary Clinton quote: "The hemispheric common market." They want that to be spread over the entire world. They want to maximize the mobility of capital, and then also diminish your own individual power to resist their will. And of course, in a very long and roundabout way, to loop this back to something personal, this involves destroying traditional masculinity. This involves, like, part of this project, an essential part of this project is turning people into genderless amoebas that just consume product and get excited for next product. It is replacing national, religious, even sexual identity with just consumer. Just, I support the status quo, whatever. And this is why I feel we see this paradigm shift going on where you see national populism, even though it's really a shadow of sort of bygone Victorian era conservatism, but national populism versus this sort of disgusting blend of the worst aspects of neoconservatism and neoliberalism. It's like this sort of progressive, socially progressive neoconservatism, where they're pushing this woke stuff on the personal level, and then they're also desperately trying to expand the American empire. And personally, I'm very concerned for the youth. I'm very concerned for the young men out there who feel that they've been given no guidance. The left is dimly aware that they've failed men. You'll see people like The Amazing Atheist, Shoe on Head, Vaush, etc., repeating these MSM talking points that the left is sort of asking itself, acknowledging in the wake of the past election. Have we failed men? Of course they've failed men. The left has nothing to offer men. All the left has to offer is just saying, oh, well, I guess you're not held to these same expectations as you were in traditional masculinity. Aren't you better off now? No, because men naturally want to be leaders, right? Just getting lit off the hook for being a deviant, for doing whatever, is not spiritually satisfying, and men know that. Um, and I'm very concerned because I felt like I was in the school system that I was in the cultural milieu that I was in. I wasn't given this guidance. Traditional male relationships have been totally destroyed by modern society. Things like brotherhood and fellowship are totally abstract and meaningless at this point. People just don't get it anymore, and that really bothers me. That really disturbs me. But as I mentioned earlier, for this project of globalism, the powers that be need this docile, complacent, apathetic, indifferent populace who will just go along with whatever they want. And having a Mannerbund, having a brotherhood, having a fraternity is antithetical to that. Having a fellowship is antithetical to that. You create a community where loyalty is the main currency. It's not some financial transaction. It's not just social compulsion or social obligation. It is loyalty around one or more moral figures. And the powers that be don't want that. But all things aside, I am almost a quarter of a century old at this point. On this, the day of my almost birth. And I'm just reflecting on things. Not really sure what I want to do with my life. I love talking to people. I love YouTube. I love hearing other opinions and ideas and engaging in things like that. That's just me. So I figured, why not throw this video out? Why not? Life is short. That's what I realized. This has been Red Channels. Your regularly scheduled programming will be back soon enough. I hope you enjoyed this. Leave a comment, please. If you didn't, whatever. Um, and I will catch you in the next one.